Hello and welcome to Flight Sim Alaska. I'm Dave, the armchair bush pilot. Today we are in a little place called Denali Park Village, or sometimes McKinley Village, depending upon the map you're looking at. The goal today is to fly out of here and head south and then west to scope out the north face of Denali. And the north face of Denali is an interesting place because it's called Wickersham Wall, and that's a 14,000 foot mountain face. It's one of the tallest on the planet, and it looks fantastic in the flight sim. So let me get this aircraft off the ground and I'll come back and talk with you. Alright, so I think this aircraft is stable enough now for me to go ahead and talk. I will say that this particular airplane is not, I think, the best in the sim. It's a little bit challenging to fly, and the autopilot is very, very inconsistent. Might just be that I don't know how it works, but I'm pretty sure that's not 100% the case. Anywho, that's not here nor there. So we are flying over the Parks Highway, also known as the Georgia Parks Highway, or Route 3 if you like. Nobody ever calls it either of those things. We just call it the Parks Highway. And it runs from Anchorage in the south to Fairbanks in the north, and that's about a 5-6 hour drive if you're driving safely. Below us is the Nenana River, not to be confused with the Tanana River, on which the community of Nenana sits. All very confusing. I actually find myself getting kind of upside down with that, but it is what it is. So this Nenana River here flows north towards the Tanana River, and then the Tanana River in turn empties into the Yukon River. So that's kind of where we're at. We are around about the midpoint on this highway, this Parks Highway between Anchorage and Fairbanks. I generally regard that Cantwell area up ahead of us is generally the middle. It's about, sort of where you stop for gas and things like that. I haven't done it in a long time, probably 4 or 5 years. I used to do it all the time when I was in college. I would drive home in the summers and sometimes in the winter. That's pretty rare scenario. It's easier to fly. I mean, it is a 5-hour drive, and flights back in the day weren't that expensive. So the plan, like I said, is to fly over to the Wickersham Wall, which is that north face of Denali. And it looks amazing in the flight simulator. I really can't say enough. I've done this a bunch of times in prep for this flight. I've actually recorded this flight like probably 4 times, but I always miss something or goof something up. In particular, like I always forget about this river, or I'm mixing it up with another river. But there's that Nenana River, and that goes off towards the east here, and look at the moon. That's awesome. And it starts way up there near where the Susitna River starts, kind of way back in there, some glaciers and things, and they kind of start in a similar spot. And this one comes and goes north, and that one goes south and empties into Cook Inlet. And then there's another couple of rivers, these Chulitna rivers. There's the west fork and then the middle fork, and presumably some kind of east fork, which I didn't see on the map, that kind of all come together and then drain into the Susitna River. And normally this flight, so we are going on a flight sim tour basically of Denali. Normally if you were going to do this in real life, the odds are pretty good you'd actually do this out of Talkeetna. And I had a request to do this flight out of Talkeetna and come up the south face here. There's Denali here. That's where we're headed, is this north face here. You can almost kind of see how that sheer drop is, and that's where we're headed. We're going to look at that. But normally, as you're coming out of Talkeetna, you're going to fly up this south side, and this is where you go climbing, and base camp is over here. And when I'll do another video specifically from there over to here. But Talkeetna is broken in the sim right now. If I try to fly out of there or get anywhere near it, the whole thing crashes. So we have to kind of wait until that gets fixed. But we can still come from here and check this out. So here's the Denali Highway from the community of Cantwell down there. And this heads off this direction, connects up with the highway system on the other side over there. I've never been up this way. It's sort of a dirt road, and there's hunting and those kinds of opportunities out here. There are caribou that come out here, and you can get a permit to go do those. It's the Nelchina caribou herd, I think, come up in this area, and then I don't know. There's another herd too. The Macomb herd is out this way. I don't know if they mix or not. But anyways, that's kind of what goes on out there. All this looks really good. There's this community of Cantwell, and again, we're over this Parks Highway and Alaska Railroad here, and this is again the Alaska Range. This looks really good. I think this the way the light shines off. Now, I set the time of the simulator at 9 p.m. on July 1st. That's where we are right now. And I did that because it looks really great, and I wanted to give people a sense of the midnight sun. It's 9 p.m. It's not going to get a heck of a lot darker than this. It does, but even until 11 o'clock, it's pretty light. The sunset takes a real long time up here. And at some point we'll do flights in the winter time when it's dark, but right now, since we're doing flight seeing and stuff, it's kind of hard to see if it's dark. But I kind of wanted to point this out for a bunch of reasons. One, it looks super spectacular, and the shadows look really good as we come up to this Wickersham Wall here. But also, it sort of highlights some things for me. As a kid growing up, some people learn to get their bearings from the sun. Sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and depending upon the position of the sun, you can kind of figure out where your cardinal directions are. In Alaska, that's not really a practical way to do things. Growing up, I grew up in Anchorage, and we've got kind of a similar situation to this right here. You've got this big valley, and then you've got these mountains here, which 3,000, 3,500 feet in the air maybe. And this is similar kind of geography to what you see in Anchorage, and you get the mountains on one side, and so I was able always to orient myself based on mountains, and because you can't tell what time of day it is, you can't tell where the heck the sun is at. Sometimes it's in the doggone north, and so it really occurred to me that I use mountains as just sort of a day-to-day guidepost. I mean, less so now because I just know my way around, everywhere. I'm very familiar with my area, but I'm not getting turned around because I know where I am when I see the mountains. And I always get confused when people are in Anchorage and they get lost. I'm like, how do you get lost in Anchorage? One, it's not that big, and two, you've got the mountains. The mountains are in the east. That's all you need to know. And when I lived in Maryland, I did live in Maryland for 1 year. Moved down there. We moved back. We got lost pretty bad in Washington, D.C. We went down into a tunnel, and it kind of turned us around a little bit. We came out, and we were just absolutely confounded. Had no idea where we were at. We even had a map. That just wasn't that helpful. And we kind of followed around another tourist for maybe 20 minutes, and they were just as lost as we were. Made me really miss the mountains and appreciate how I rely on them, I guess, for direction and this kind of stuff. Anyways, it's sort of just an anecdote how I grew up and how I rely on these mountains for navigation when we've got our midnight sun not providing any help whatsoever in terms of direction or time of day or anything else. It's just kind of a crapshoot, Growing up as a kid here, I would be out sometimes until 10 o'clock at night because you didn't know. It was still like this out, actually. This is like midday, and it's still warm too. It's in the 60s maybe. And yeah, so that's what I had to say about that. So we're coming up on the Chalitna River right here. This is the West Fork, and there's another fork that comes over here, and they all kind of join. And they come together in Talkeetna, which again, I tried to come out of Talkeetna. That's where I wanted to start this video. But by not starting there, actually now I've got more content here for you guys, because I'll be able to do this this northern Wickersham Wall. We can talk about that, and then in a later video we can come back and revisit Denali. And there's so much that can be said about this area. There's so much written about it. There's so much easily findable material that it's kind of low-hanging fruit. Plus, because it's a national park and such a prominent landmark in North America, the landscape is well done and the imagery is well done. So it makes for a really cool tour. So thinking about Talkeetna and why it's cool, there's a lot of reasons it's cool. You do fly out of there to that's where people launch for hiking Denali. But this Chalitna River and the Susitna River and then also the Talkeetna River all come together right in town. And so if you go to visit as a tourist, go into town, go past the touristy cool stuff, which you're going to want to walk past, like the restaurants, cool little shops. We try to do it every summer. It's a good time, good afternoon. But you go straight down there, and there's like a park at the very end of the road. You just park in there, and you can walk right out to the Susitna River, and you can see where those other two rivers come in, the Chulitna and the Talkeetna all merge. And it's really neat, and it's a big open sort of plain, and I wish I could describe it better, but it kind of looks like this. So granted, we're pretty high in the air, but this West Chulitna, it's probably one of the best representations of a glacial-fed river I've seen in the sim thus far, and it's because you get these wide, I guess, sandbars and things like this, and a little channel in there. Maybe you get some braids of river, some sloughs, and that kind of stuff. But anyway, this looks really good, and when you're down there towards the Susitna River, this is kind of what it looks like. And you've got this very fast-moving gray current, right along the edge where you can go stand in Talkeetna. At least that's the channel as of last time I went there in the spring, last summer. It kind of looks to me like up here there might be some weirdness with water. I don't think that's a lake. I've been eyeballing that ever since I flew up here the first time, and I kind of want to fly out there, but it's real close to Talkeetna, and I think it might crash. But anyways, we'll get there at some point. So yeah, look at I just like how this looks in sort of the late evening. And I've flown over this when it's looked like this, and it looks really, really amazing. And so another time I was flying from Anchorage in the south to Fairbanks in the north here, and I was in a 737. Usually that's what you're flying. Alaska Airlines tends to be your standard carrier up here, and that's what they fly. You can also take out a Dash 8, so it's like a turboprop. It's one of the disappointments of the flight sim. I was kind of hoping that somebody would have modeled one of those in, because it'd be real authentic to be flying around Alaska in one of them. Chulitna River. That looks really good. I think if we were closer, we'd probably see the weird artifacts, river being where not supposed to be and so on. But I think that looks real good anyways. Okay, so anyway, back to the story. So one morning we flew here, and it's a short flight anyhow. On a 737, it's like 45 minutes, give or take. It's short enough they can't even get down the aisle fast enough to give you orange juice and coffee anymore. Maybe 15 years ago, it was like an hour, and they had just enough time to make that happen. But the pilot decided it was a beautiful day just like this, and there was enough tourists on board that it was going to be really worth everybody's time to go ahead and fly around. And I'm pretty sure we came around the west side over here and then came around like so, but we definitely flew around this. And of course, we were above it. I mean, we're in a 737. We're probably at 30,000 feet anyhow, which is plenty high above this mountain here. But it was absolutely spectacular. It was one of the best flight things I have ever done, and you could really see that day, for whatever reason, that it was super clear, and all these high peaks throughout this Alaska range here were just in super high relief. They just looked taller than they normally do, and it was absolutely stunning. And I kind of wanted to try to replicate that with the lighting here, and unfortunately in the sim you don't get atmospheric effects that sometimes make the mountains seem much taller than they really are. So yeah, anyways, this is that the west fork of that Chulitna River, and it heads up to this West Fork Glacier, which you can't really see because of the angle of the sun, but we're going to see a ton of glaciers in here, so I don't think it's much of a loss. So turning our attention back to Denali here again, renamed from Mount McKinley. Now, let's start with the local name. So Denali does come from the Koyukon Athabascan, which is one Athabascan group in the area, and there's a ton of others. There's the Denina, we've talked about the Denina people, the Otna, which are off to our east, the lower Tanana to our north, the middle Tanana, the upper Kuskokwim, and the Degaton. And there's more actually than that. These are just the ones I wrote down. And so if you're interested in that, you can start with Wikipedia and they talk about this stuff. But that Koyukon name, and I'll pop it up down there in the left-hand corner, is, I think, pretty darn close to how we say Denali now. My guess is that it's got a different cadence and so on in the traditional pronunciation. But I'm personally happy to see that we were able to adopt a local indigenous name for this mountain. Now, we I think, like, locally, a lot of us have called it Denali for a long time, so that change wasn't really a big deal. None of us, like, really lost any sleep over it. I think it was people elsewhere in the country weren't too pleased with it. They felt it sort of revised their history, and that's true, but we're also got to consider that there's Denali people, or I'm sorry, Athabascan people, stuck in my previous videos here, Athabascan people here who, you know, we should respect their traditional place names as well, as much as we can. But I don't remember ever calling it Mount McKinley, really. I remember my grandparents would come up and visit and call it that, and I was just like, it's not really what we call it here. But what we consider it, what you always hear is people say it means the Great One, and I suspect that on travel brochures and this kind of stuff, that's what you see, and that's not what it means in the Athabascan. Pretty much any Athabascan dialect in this region has it some flavor of Big Mountain or the Tall One, not the Great One. The Great One is it's a fairly, it's not that far off as far as translations go, I don't think, but it's not truly accurate here. So there's that. And now I didn't spend a lot of time looking up local Athabascan place names and things like that for this particular video, because we're sort of a weird, as far as I can tell from various maps, sort of a weird nexus, or sort of a mixing area where in every cardinal direction I can just about point out a different group of people, or different language group. And so I felt like place names, one, it was going to be hard because I really have just the Denali names to work with, and I feel like it would be unfair to exclude sort of like the Koyukon and the Tanana folks in that discussion. I mean, at some point I'll probably do a video that talks about some of that stuff if I can find good resources. And that's the other thing too, is sometimes it can be really challenging to find good resources for those names, and I know that they exist, they're around, I just don't have them to my fingertips. I have a lot of that stuff at work. A lot of people I work with will have that stuff to their fingertips. And the only reason I have the Denali stuff is because that's my region where I live, and the material is relatively handy pretty much anywhere you go. So again, we're moving over this West Fork Glacier. I've already forgotten. Yeah, that's right, West Fork Glacier. We're going to head through this pass here, and this here is Anderson Pass, and just on the other side of that is a glacier called Muldrow Glacier. That's where we're going now. Off to our right here, which is to say off to our north, there's a small community called Kantishna. I don't remember how large it is, but you can get there by road. It's at the end of the Denali Park Road, which is accessed from that the place near where we started. There's the Denali National Park visitor centers out there, and that's sort of on the same road that eventually comes out here. And we are in the Denali National Park at this point, pretty much crossed into it as soon as we moved into these mountains here. We're starting to get to the point where these mountains are at a higher elevation, the peaks are than we're flying, which is pretty cool. So here's that Muldrow Glacier below us here. That's what we're going over. Somewhere out of here, and I think it's further up, as we get the Tolklat River, and that was actually requested by somebody to do some bush landings on that, and I just haven't done it yet. I'm going to scope that out before too long, but I wanted to get this video done first because it seemed pretty cool. I got the request to do Denali, and then couldn't get out of Talkeetna, and so I took off out of that Denali Village Park, and that's in an area we sometimes call Glitter Gulch. It's this sort of really dense touristy area of like lodges and buildings and hotels and cabins and all kinds of stuff. And I've stayed there a couple of times when I was younger, and you drive through there and it feels like you're in the wilderness, like just typical wilderness Alaska, and then suddenly you're in like Touristville, and it's real nice, and everything's sort of like, highly polished, and nice, raw wood log cabins and this kind of stuff. It's pretty neat for tourists. For the rest of us who live here, it's sort of kind of not very authentic, to be perfectly honest. But whatever, the point is, when people come up here, they have a good time, and they love what they see. That's what we really are about right now. Gosh, look at this. I love looking at this. Okay, so there's so much I can say about this. I've kind of been nattering on quite a bit, and I'm missing, I think, a lot of what I wanted to say. So an interesting thing about this is you could see from the other side where the Alaska Range kind of comes up rather rapidly and then really builds up to this peaks here. But then it drops off like bam right now. This is not very far. From Anchorage, you can only really see like Foraker and Denali. Foraker's kind of on the other side here. And but from Fairbanks up north there, off in that direction, you can see the whole Alaska Range just stretching from east to west. And Denali does figure into that. Now in the wintertime in particular, you get these great atmospheric lensing effects where the mountains seem taller, so they seem bigger than they are, and you get these weird effects with this sort of like, what are they called? Like bluffs here. None of that's real, it's just kind of this crazy atmospheric thing that you get with temperature inversions. And so anyways, just kind of interesting. But this whole thing is just really easy to see from Fairbanks, particularly when you're up on the hills and you have a nice clear view. If you're in Fairbanks, one, go to the museum at the university, and two, look south over that ridge from that museum, and you will see this from there. And it's absolutely stunning. 100%. Cannot say enough about that particular view. And if you happen to be there in the wintertime, even better. This here's Brooks Glacier. I don't have a lot to say about that except it's Brooks Glacier. This one up here has got a funny name that I'm having a hard time spelling because it's got a weird Tralekin. I popped it up there. You can see it's the EI has got me tripped up. I've never heard anybody pronounce it, so I'm not really sure how we're going here. And then this here is that Muldrow Glacier that kind of comes up and around, and then over here there's some like funny stuff. It's like lower rock fall or ice fall and upper ice fall or something. It doesn't really, I don't think those features really show up particularly well in the sim in terms of how they render or whatever. Now what I don't know is whether or not Flight Scene Tours would take you up this way. I suspect they will. I have an idea this is probably a pretty popular thing to go and do because it's absolutely spectacular. I do have a friend who's grew up kind of up in Lake Minchuma, and I think his dad used to take people up this way, and they had a lodge out there. So I think that you can get people to take you out here. And I don't know what the price tag is on that. I don't think it's profoundly expensive to have these Flight Scene Tours, but it's not. I mean, it's not obviously not cheap. When I first flew through this a bunch of times, I did it kind of at noon because, noon, it's easy to fly, whatever, it's easy to see, but the light's kind of flat. This feature did not pop until I had the sun lower down, and this looks spectacular to me. When I first saw it, I was like, holy moly, that looks fantastic. That is awesome. It's such a great thing, and so I think that's my way of saying it. If you're in the flight simulator, you're flying around, definitely try places at different times of day, because sometimes the way the shadows are and the fact that it's realistic, it gives you a different view, especially in spectacularly well done places like this here. I mean, look at this. This is, I think, easily the best place I've flown to in the simulator yet. And granted, I haven't flown to there's this new Japan update. I think that's supposed to be pretty spectacular, but this is my home. I'm pleased to see how well this turns out. Now, I've been saying throughout that this is not as rigid, not as rugged as it's supposed to be, but from far away, Denali doesn't look particularly rugged because it's so subdued with snow and stuff. So I want to say this actually looks really good. I mean, that looks kind of weird, but I think it's just not rendered in very well yet. I don't have the most powerful computer in the universe. I'd like to get an upgrade, but kind of not in the cards right now. So here's Gunsight Pass. We're going to pass through this. This is Gunsight Mountain. There are a gazillion of these throughout Alaska, these Gunsight Mountains and Gunsight Passes. I feel like they're just about everywhere, particularly where you have glaciers and things like this. Look at this. It seems to me like we've got some clouds, some cloud, what's it called, cloud shadows that came into the imagery here that, I don't know, it's just kind of goofy. Maybe someday they'll fix that. So this here is where the the North American plate, tectonic plate, meets the Pacific plate, and they're sort of crushed together and raise these high mountains. There are some pretty impressive fault lines that run through here, and have been some very spectacular earthquakes, even in the last 20 years, that have ripped through here. I just wanted to point that out. It's sort of like the Himalaya situation, where you have the Indian subcontinent sort of crashing into that Asian plate. This is just at a much smaller scale. This is beautiful here. This here is Peters Glacier. It winds all the way up here to Peters Basin. And you can see just how rapidly it comes from just about 19,000, actually just a little more than 19,000 feet on this north peak here. And of course the south peak, which is the taller one, is just over 20,000, 20,310 I think is the latest height estimate that they've got. And this here is Wickersham Wall. This is 14,000 feet from top to here. I did find one source that had it at 9,000 feet, but that was from an article from like the 50s or the 60s, I think, maybe the 60s. And so I don't tend to believe that too much. The Wikipedia article had this, and then a couple of other places had it as well, as 14,000 feet. Now, I did look to see, it is named for Judge Wickersham, which is James Wickersham, and he is reported to have been the first person to attempt to scale this. That did not happen, and also I did find some materials suggesting that it was not really a legitimate attempt in any case. Judge Wickersham is a well-known person from the early 1900s in this state, and there's all kinds of junk named for that guy. But it was summited in 1963 by two climbing teams. I don't know, they took different routes, but I don't know where on this face they took. And those are the only two I was able to find. One was a Canadian team, and the other one was from Harvard University Climbing Club. And I don't think since then anybody has scaled it. I'm sure there's been plenty of attempts, but I couldn't find anything. And someone might correct me on that. Maybe there's just sources I'm not aware of. I do know that in the 90s, some guys actually skied down this slope. You can apparently ski down it. It was not done all at one time. They did it over the span of like 4 days or something like this, or 4 separate attempts. So they like maybe started here and then came halfway down and then helicoptered up and so on. Now, as you can see, we're at 10,000 feet, and this mountain is just absolutely well above us. I haven't been anywhere in the sim that's remotely like this, and so I just think it was remarkable to bring this and share this, and I just think it's awesome. I mean, look how good this is here. And I think that the time of day is also pretty cool as well. As I said, I think this is not the tallest, mountain face, and it's certainly not the tallest cliff. It's not really a cliff. I think the tallest cliff I was able to find was Mount Thor in Canada, and that's about 4,100 feet. If you've never looked at Mount Thor, I'd go check that out on Wikipedia or Google it. It's a pretty neat looking mountain. I might actually do that one day just to see how it looks in the sim, because there's just so much spectacular stuff that's here, actually, surprisingly. I mean, look at this. Now, you would think flying around here that you'd maybe just be able to come around this ridge and the mountain would be there, but no. This is kind of solid, I guess, buttress, sort of all the way over, and you can come over here, I guess, and presumably people do. I mean, I'm only at 10,000 feet. This aircraft can go a lot higher, so you'd want to come in maybe 20,000 feet or something like this if you wanted to circle around, and maybe I will do that in a future video. But this is true here. We're not going to at this height come through here, and I'm actually going to come down through this pass and head back to the east. I'm not going to be able to get back through those passes and find that Glitter Gulch place again, but we don't have to go all the way that far out. I really just wanted to bring you out here and show off Denali and how wonderful it comes out in the flight sim. And even going this way over here, I think as we come around, I'll try and keep that in view. You can see that this mountain buttress here, I guess, just doesn't, there's no opening here. There's no pass, really. I mean, I think there's a pass through here, and I think if you fly around here, it kind of comes down low enough you can actually pass through about 10,000 feet, but you can see right there, you're not getting there. So I guess it's time to come out of the mountains here. Off in this direction, there's all these rivers and things that drain off into the Bering Sea. The Kuskokwim actually headwaters over here in this Alaska Range, kind of in that direction, I think. And then some of these rivers actually drain to the north, and the Yukon River. This is spectacular. I actually couldn't find the name for this doggone glacier. I looked and looked and I couldn't figure it out. And the map I'm using is problematic because right in this area actually splits across 4 separate pages that are like, 2 of them are right next to each other, and the other 4 pages are like 20 pages down. And a lot of the most important names and stuff are kind of split on the edge of the pages. Is kind of a pain in the butt. It made it really hard to research and get all the names down and stuff for you guys. This here isn't quite as spectacular, I think, in the sim as I'd like it to be, but boy, this sure looks good, doesn't it? Try to go all the way. I want to come parallel with the mountain here and see if we can't maybe get one more look at that north face of Denali as we head back to the east. And there is not a lot of communities out here, by the way. We're in pretty darn remote territory. I mean, we are not that far from the road. Kantishna is out here, and there is a road out towards the main highway that runs north-south. But as you go this way, you got to kind of go a ways before you get to any major communities. Here we go. We're coming around, and again, you can really see this really well from Fairbanks. And it's spectacular flying over pretty much any time. Still trying to get parallel here. I really don't like this aircraft that well. Just something's wrong with the autopilot, and it just doesn't respond well. I can never get it up to cruising speed. I think part of it is I'm just not high enough altitude. Here we go. I think we'll get this in review one more time. There we go. So there's our Wickersham Wall right there. One of the 14,000 feet, one of the tallest vertical faces from top to bottom on the planet. And just to give you an idea, the tallest is about 16,000 feet, and that's in Pakistan. So we're only a couple thousand feet off of that. So anyway, that's all I had to share with you guys today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. Make sure that notification bell's lit up if you want to know when things are coming out so you don't miss anything. Otherwise, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I had a great time sharing Wickersham Wall with you, and I'll see you in the next video.